Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of 1010 Hammer Talks. Of course, I am joined by my fellow co-host here, Jeremy. Got another pretty awesome show here for you guys, so I will pass it off to him so he can give you our normal spiel and we'll get started.
Alrighty. I still want one of these days to take it from Chad and have one of these guys do this opening. 'Cause I think they've heard it enough times. But for those who haven't yet, welcome to the show. We are Jeremy and Alex. We are from 10 Ton Hammer, 10tonhammer.com. We do encourage you always to check out the site that we work for. A lot of our work goes up there, both written and video stuff from us, as well as several other talented writers. In a variety of topics and games and genres. Got news, features, guides, all sorts of stuff. So if you haven't yet, check out 10tonhammer.com. We also have forums there, so you can really, take part in the discussion. And we really encourage that. And without 10 Ton Hammer, we wouldn't be here. And we want to keep doing the show for you guys, so check it out.
Awesome, yeah, definitely check it out. That is where most of our content comes from. But without further ado, I know you guys aren't here to see us. So yeah, we have a special guest here today. You guys might be familiar with developer quite a long time in the industry. Thomas Blair worked on a lot of projects. I won't really go into all that. I'll let him talk about what he wants to talk about. But Thomas Blair from Crowfall Artcraft. So yeah, go ahead and tell us about yourself and kind of some background for you.
Well, howdy everybody. Yeah, as you said, I've been doing this for quite a bit of time. I go back to EverQuest Planes of Power was the first project that I worked on as a game developer, and then went into Star Wars Galaxies and spent a bunch of time on that, DC Universe Online. I did some work for Disney, and then I ended up working for Gordon and Todd over at Artcraft, working on Crowfall.
Yeah, awesome.
So that's my abbreviated.
Oh, nice. That's good. Keep it nice. Keep it short. Is good. Yeah, I'm familiar with a lot of the things that you've worked on. I was playing a lot of Daybreak Games stuff back SOE Live, a lot of original EverQuest, tinkered with some Star Wars Galaxies, and a lot of DCUO as well. So a lot of cool stuff there. From what I understand, you had your hands a lot in some of the system mechanics for DC Universe Online. You even had, I think, a patent with that game, didn't you?
So I've been more of a systems guy pretty much my entire career, which is the mechanics side of the house, the numbers, combat, progression, all of that stuff. My patents actually, I got two while I was working on Star Wars Galaxies. Actually, they came 5 years later because that's how long it takes to get a software patent through the patent office. But it's still kind of one of the cooler laurels in this industry, since I only know maybe 2 or 3 other designers who have them. So it's kind of one of those cool things that, hey, I did something really, 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 really cool, and here's your little trophy for it, since we don't have kind of a formalized awards kind of process in the industry.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad that we got the chance to have you on the show today. One of the more interesting things I think about Crowfall, for people that might be watching that aren't familiar with it, it has some really creative ideas for how to do combat and how to do progression, really, in an MMO world relating to combat. So, and that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But I'm excited to have you on. Being that systems guy, and you're kind of, I believe your official title is the design lead for Crowfall. But you said, I think you've got a lot of different hats you wear. Can you talk about some of the things, your responsibilities that you cover for the game?
One of the challenges of being a small studio is everybody owns a very large chunk of something, as well as several other things. So I also have some producer roles in the design spectrum. Normally, my role would be bucketed out into a lot of sub roles. And then there's just some general studio stuff that you need that we just don't have the people for. So we all kind of wear 2 or 3 hats, it's great because being vets, we kind of know what you need out of a studio, right? So working in a large studio, these things just kind of happen. But like Gordon, Todd, and I, and Bill, and Melissa, we all see that, hey, we have to do these other things to make the studio move forward. So it's definitely a challenge, because you're kind of trying to juggle a bunch of balls at the same time and not specifically focus on one area.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see what you have to say about some of the topics we have here. I guess we can just jump right into the first kind of big topic, which I have here. The world of Crowfall is pretty interesting. Actually, for people that do follow our content on Tent and a Hammer, I recently did an exclusive with you guys, previewing your or debuting that hero art, and then doing an interview with J. Todd Coleman about the lore. So I didn't really get a chance to dig into the world until that point, but when I did, it really kind of had some interesting things, the way that you guys are tying your lore into kind of the mechanics of the game. Like, the lore really is telling the story of what you want players to experience in your game. So I don't know what role you played in that, but can you talk about kind of how the lore, is injected into Crowfall and the gameplay experience you guys are hoping to give to players?
Sure. So lore in MMOs is kind of usually it comes across to the player via quests and things like that, where you send them out on shores and you unveil the lore to them one little nugget at a time. So we don't have a PvE quest arc planned at all. So we have to build up these stories and kind of release them ahead of time. So when players come in, they know about the gods, they know about the hunger, they know about the struggle between the gods. What happened to the Allfather? Where is he, and why aren't we helping get him back? Kind of background. So it's kind of cool that we're releasing lore in these kind of big chunks prior to the launch of the project, because we won't have that mechanism to give it out to the players. It's also it's funny because Todd wrote a lot of the lore and set it up for Shadowbane, so he just kind of fell right into that role. So it's great that he kind of already had that hat, and boom, he's making it work. What's kind of interesting is our bigger reveal that we've been teasing for this month is steeped in that lore and somewhat based on it, but it's not just the lore. And I'm just throwing that out for the people who are kind of playing the game of rampant speculation, trying to figure out what our big reveal is.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's one really cool thing I've enjoyed about watching Crowfall. As you guys have gone from, I mean, you started out with your kind of countdown until the Kickstarter, and you did your Kickstarter. I thought you guys have done really clever with your marketing and the way that you've kind of, built the hype, but not in such a way that you're building it up so high that it topples over. So it's really cool to see the new ways you guys are coming up with releasing the next update, the next bit of news and stuff. So it's pretty fun to watch the way you guys work.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because prior to this project, for me really, I'd never really seen that. It's almost like, and Todd describes it as, we're running a variety show on the side of making a game. Right, so we release 2 or 3 YouTube drops, some lore every week, what we're doing. Hey, meet this developer. These are the people who are actually making the game, which is really cool because any other studio that I've worked for, everyone is more of a cog in the wheel, and a cog in the machine, and maybe the producers or who made this game, but it's really 300 other people that you've never even heard of or will ever hear of. On Crowfall, you're hearing about the engineers who are making the thing. You're hearing how they got into the industry and how they ended up here through our Murder of Crows series. So it's just super exciting to be able to actually run this variety show while building a game.
So let me ask you, because we've talked in the past, just on previous episodes of the show, about the importance of a game developer really connecting with the community, and building up that relationship, and how some have done it better than others, and definitely you guys, have taken a different approach than, as you mentioned, a lot of other studios have. Was there internal discussion beforehand? What was that like that made you guys decide yes, this is the way we want to go, even though it's not the norm per se?
I think it was part of a clever nugget that Todd had in a way to kind of pull the community in. Plus we are a crowdfunded project, so the more word we can get out there virally about our project, the better. So engaging the community and trying not to wall them up on a forum. Here's forums, go do your thing, but actually here's a bunch of content, interact with other people and bring more people into the community. I mean, that's kind of been the whole goal all along, is because in a sea of games out there, how do you even get exposure when you're building the thing? Because most people don't understand gray box worlds and things like that we've been showing all our first Hunger Domes.
Right.
Yeah. With Crowfall, you guys, as you guys have been going early on, like you said, showing things that people, it's getting more common, I think, that we're getting a lot of indie developers doing, early access, different types of crowdfunding where people are able to get in on the client early. So people are getting more familiar with it, but definitely that, clarifying terms and what things are and what they mean and is something that's really important. So I'm glad you guys are kind of taking the time to do that, where a lot of other developers are just kind of leaving it up to the players to figure out what they want and building their own expectations. So I like the way you guys are managing things there. I think it's really important with the project, the type of project you're doing, especially. It's really challenging, I think, with community management in general for an MMO. Do you guys find that it's even more challenging since you're playing towards an audience that's has a lot of competitive energy? Do you guys find your community harder to manage than past communities you've done before?
That is an excellent question. Our community manager isn't here to talk about it. I'm sure she could lend some words in there. But it's funny because Todd has built games on two ends of the spectrum. His first game, Shadowbane, was all about building a city with a bunch of people and then going and kicking over everybody else's cities. And then his next series of projects were kids games. So you have these PvPers who love stepping and destroying on other people's stuff on one end of the spectrum, and you have kids on the other end of the spectrum. So we saw when we first started doing our Kickstarter, this kind of oil and water mix on the forums, and it was actually more like sharks and sheep, I guess, swimming in the water. It was not pretty, and I think Todd even put up a message. It was like, "Hey guys, stop being dicks, right? This isn't a kill them all now. It's like we're trying to build something here. Just stop being dicks to other people, right?" So that was definitely an interesting moment. And then trying to keep everybody focused on this is how you build a game, and this is what we're building, and this is the various stages of the project, i.e., this is a gray box world. It has no textures. This is how you build a power, and then we show a series of videos how you build it. So bringing the community back in there and actually teaching them a lot of implementation stuff is kind of cool, because it kind of also helps temper the expectations that we can't build things overnight. I mean, we did build our first milestone really quickly, but you just can't build everything at once. It's kind of funny when we announced the next thing today, everybody's like, "Hey, put this in there, and put that in there, and put that in there, and put that in there." It's just, yeah, we don't have time for all of that.
I do think that's good, as you said, when you're educating the community while expecting everyone to be perfectly reasonable at all times is not exactly feasible, but it can help, I guess give them somewhat more reasonable expectations, and really bringing them into the process rather than saying, okay, here's what we have and wait until we tell you anything else, and you're really, keeping people involved in that process. I do think that's probably a good way to go about it when you do have to interact with them so closely.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because most games, players just play the end product, right? They may see like a beta, and a beta is a couple years of development, so they never even got to see the early models, the rough edges, the gray boxes, the prototype UIs. And on Crowfall, we're walking them through that process that we go through, because we'll put something in and rip it out and put something else in many, many times on the road to a live product. And especially in an MMO, which takes anywhere from 4 to 5 years usually of this maturing process, things change over the course of the project, and the players only ever get to see that last 80% of it usually. They come in near the very end, so in their mind, that's what the game is, and then from there it just deviates a little bit. Whereas for us, we started with, I think, we made a video, a 30-minute video, which was the making of the Hunger Dome 1.0, where we showed them every 2 weeks. Tully and I would sit down and walk through our tools and show them, this is how you make a character. And we had a bunch of gray box stuff, animations that weren't in there. None of the icons were finished. They were all the same icon. Nothing worked really well. and then just to walk them through that process. So it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. No one has really done kind of an extensive behind the scenes, the making of the game. It was kind of funny. I looked back at my old files and screenshots from DC Universe Online, and I had one, maybe two screenshots of the early project of 3 years of development, and we shifted hundreds of times in there. And it's kind of a shame. I look back, I'm like, man, I really should have just been taking a screenshot a day. Which, so when we started working on Crowfall and we have a video producer, it's like, hey, every 2 weeks, let's just film the project and talk about what we built over the previous weeks, and we'll just watch it evolve over the course of the whole project. So the first two making of videos have been pretty exciting, and I was pretty pleased with the results. And it's just amazing to watch the game that you play today, and you get to see it when it was way infancy stage.
That's very cool. Yeah, one of the things, handling that extra layer, I guess, of communicating with the players about this process. It adds to the workload a little bit, I think. But I guess my real question is, you guys obviously, considered the cost and weight of that. Do you feel like having all the players in, having kind of such a big, I don't know about big test group, but having the players involved so early is helping you guys maybe speeding up the process of the development that it would normally be? Or is it about the same?
Oh, no, I actually think it's way more helpful to us, because just getting a patcher in somebody's hands and having them walk through the process of patching the game, loading it on their machine, getting in, and actually just controlling the character, there is a series of 100 small steps that happens to make all of those things happen. And normally on a project, you don't have to do that all the way to the end, and it's a super scramble. But for us, we had to do it with the release of 1.0, right? We let people in after roughly 16 weeks of development, and we had to do all of that patcher work and picking a character and creating a character. Normally, we just use console commands for a really long time until you actually start building those things. But since we've moved them forward, it's actually more convenient for us now to do our own internal play testing and just getting into the game, because we've built all that. And it also shows us the kinds of hardware compatibility problems that players may have, or, hey, they need to have this, like, you don't see particles unless you have this very specific Microsoft DLL installed. So we got to see all those problems right off the bat.
Yeah, I've always been curious about it, because there's other games. Obviously, there's some other big studios. I don't know if you're familiar with what EverQuest Next is doing. I'm sorry, what Daybreak is doing with EverQuest Next, and they're also have the same thing with Landmark and having a bunch of people in super early. So I've always been curious, having followed that game, just to wonder, if it's helping speed things up or what kind of impact it's making. So I'm glad you shared that. It's pretty cool to see that, having the players in early, it's not just a Kickstarter backer perk, it's actually helping you guys complete the game faster. So that's pretty cool to know.
Yeah, you watch the Kickstarter trend, and it's interesting because a lot of studios, they raise their money and then they go radio silent for X amount of months, and they either surface or they say, oh, we ran out of money. And you really have no way to connect the dots from backing to where they are now. And with all of our releases and showing people, they get to see it grow with us, which is a really awesome experience.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to jump into the next topic I had. We were talking a little bit about the world earlier, and talking about how you guys are developing the world. One of the really unique things about Crowfall is how you guys are doing the actual physical world. You guys, I believe, are planning some amount of procedural generation, utilizing Voxel Farm, which, for anybody that's familiar with Landmark, or that's another big title that kind of is utilizing Voxel Farm. But it looks like you guys are doing totally different things with Voxel Farm. Can you talk about, I don't know, as one of the systems guys, can you talk about kind of what your plan is for how players are going to interact with the world?
Sure. So you said procedural generation, so I'll go into that a little bit. What we plan to do is create Tetris pieces. And the Tetris pieces are of, just imagine Tetris in your head, and they're X amount of bricks by X amount of bricks. So you have your standard like 4x1 piece, or maybe that's the 3x1 piece. It looks like an L. And we would have our environment artists go in and actually build out that piece so it would look good. And then around the seams, he would make it look like you would expect when it snapped to another Tetris piece. So we build a lot of these big Tetris pieces, and when a world spins up, the plan is it just basically reaches into the bag and grab 15 of the 16-piece Tetris pieces. There's 16 grids total, and drop them in the world. And then grab a bunch of 10-size pieces, and then grab some of 5-size pieces. And all those pieces are essentially where we've placed castles and structures and our points of interest, like the mines, the lumber mills, the things like that. And then in between those, we kind of sprinkle in the 1x1s, which is our forests and other things. And now the world is procedurally generated, but we've done it in logical blocks. The problem with most procedural games is you say, hey, go make this big procedural world. It comes up with something that's unplayable because it'll put a mountain right next to a lake, for example, or it just terrain that's just nonsensical to most people. So what we're going to try and do, like I said, is we'll establish what the building blocks are, put them in the world, and then seed it in. So every time you go to a campaign world, that world will feel different, right? If you imagine any PvP game, let's just use WoW Wrathy Basin as an example. They have 5 very specific nodes. So there's a very specific strategy of run to the mines, run to the blacksmith, run to the lumber mill, where Crowfall, the world, they will know what a blacksmith is or what a lumber mill is, but they won't know where they are. They have to find them first in the world because the world is going to be different every single time, which dovetails nicely into our Eternal Kingdoms. So when the player builds their own Eternal Kingdoms, they will be able to go grab those shapes and start placing them in the world. Many of our Kickstarter packages had like a castle in it or a keep or the mountain citadel, and those are those predefined Tetris pieces. So we're going to be using the same Tetris pieces from the campaigns in the Eternal Kingdom, and ideally the same system, so we're not building everything twice, right? That's kind of the pitfall to game development is not smart reuse of your systems. So we're going to try and optimize that and use the same system for both the player homes as well as the campaign worlds. And wow, that was long-winded.
No, that was good.
Yeah, so... oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, it's really interesting to me. You know, you brought up a great example, you know, of WoW or Wrathy Basin. I think you kind of run into that in just about any game, you know, Counter-Strike or something, if you don't know the map. And it's one of the things that I find is kind of like a barrier to entry for a lot of players that are new players. You know, they're immediately behind because they haven't mastered the map, you know, no matter what their skill level is. Just not knowing the map and the strategies already sets them behind. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I think it'll help players unfamiliar with your type of game actually kind of engage in that and feel like they can be, you know, impactful right out the gate.
Yeah, the exploration of the environment is one of the huge things we're banking on to make every game or every campaign feel different. I mean, yes, the building blocks are the same, but they're rearranged differently. And sometimes you may just not have 5 large castles in this campaign. When it went into the grab bag, it only grabbed 3 when the world spun up, and everybody needs to figure out how the absence of now those 2 castles that were in the previous campaign, how do they deal with that? What does that mean? Does that mean that a whole team is without a base castle? They have to settle for a smaller keep or something like that, or they push into somebody else's castle early on because, again, it's a hot commodity. So I think when you look at PvP games, you're absolutely right. Maps tend to get static. People learn the maps, and then they master the characters and as well as the flow through the map. For us, since the map is going to ideally never be the same again, there will be some very unique campaigns that people will be able to look back on and go, hey, remember campaign XYZ? It was really cool because the castle spawned in this specific spot, which all of this craziness happened around it all the time.
Yeah, do you guys have plans for? I know you guys actually have some plans for some really long-term campaigns. In those longer-term campaigns, or even in the shorter ones, I know you guys are planning to use some sort of destructibility with it, utilizing the voxels. So, um, how much will any given world change throughout the duration of like a single campaign?
So, I mean, you brought up landmark earlier, and you know that the landmark world heals after a period of time, so you really can't dig giant potholes essentially in the world, which was kind of our tentative plan as well. Was you're really not going to be able to dig up every single aspect of the world, and just there is no world at that point. Is everything just hanging in the air? So there will be healing over time. Is the plan for the environment? Because otherwise, yes. It was kind of funny. If I look back at DC when we talked about having a fully destructible world for the superheroes, and people would just, I mean, what do you think they would do with a bunch of superhero powers? They would basically knock apart Metropolis and just let it sit there like that all busted up, which is kind of something you don't want to do.
Yeah, we talked about it. I think it was last week. We were talking about having the destructible world is cool, and making players feel like they have an impact. But then you also have to really think about exactly how much control do we really want to give them over the overall state of the entire world, because there are certain perhaps limits you might need to set for that. And I think it's kind of the conclusion you guys came to with the somewhat healing world, because you don't just want it to be a desolate wasteland a few days in and it just stays that way for the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, I think that creative energy players will be able to put into their Eternal Kingdoms, though, right? So that is kind of your creative mode building. If you perhaps enjoy a desolate wasteland with a bunch of goblin spawners or whatever, you can do that in your Eternal Kingdom, right? However you want to kind of build your EK, that's more the creative mode, whereas the campaign is I need to obey by the system rules because we can make a fun game out of beating each other over the head with large objects.
Right. Speaking of, actually, unless you had something else you wanted to add in that before you move on, Alex. I was going to say, speaking of beating over the head with large objects, the other kind of thing we wanted to talk about, in this topic was the mechanics of combat, and exactly how players are going to be able to, I guess, get to that point.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, talk about what Crowfall's offering in that regard.
Sure. So, if any of you played DC Universe Online, you know that we had objects in the world that you could pick up, like cars and barrels. It wasn't freeform. Hey, I'm ripping up this chunk of earth and throwing it. I'm doing an animation, and then I'm putting a big giant rock in your hands, and then you can throw it. A rigid body, and we will have that kind of thing. We haven't got to really large scale projectiles yet. I think right now in the Hunger Dome, our largest projectile is the Confessor Fireball, and it behaves like a projectile, rigid body. What do you expect? It hits things. One of the fun things we've noticed with the Ranger, and we started playing with her arrows, is we can make them bounce off of the ground rather than get eaten by the ground. So we're doing kind of trick shots with her arrows now, just because they're full-on projectiles, and we can do that. It's one of the more fun things about working with the physics. Sorry, I just had a kitten run across the keyboard. If you've seen my video, you know that I surround myself with the kittens. Anyways, so we have large-scale projectiles. We'd like to have people be able to rip up pieces of the ground if we can and throw those things. Probably would be a rather big character that would have to do that, and not our smaller ones. Digging through the ground through these rigid bodies is something that we would like as well. But basically, I'm just trying to imagine it in my head as I'm seeing people running around destroying the castle and destroying in front of the castle, and voxels exploding and the walls exploding. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
That's outside the realms of normal, kind of the combat that you've seen in the Hunger Dome 1.0 now. Because, again, we're showing pieces of it yet. We haven't quite got to rigid bodies and encasing other players and knocking those things around the world. We're still dealing with the very early stage of our combat.
Yeah, that's one thing. As I was participating in Landmark, that running into that as they were prototyping their combat, which they haven't been able to change a lot of that, or maybe they have. We just haven't seen it yet. But yeah, with when you're dealing with that type of destructible terrain and voxels and how people's abilities are going to be able to tear stuff up, I can imagine there's a lot of back end coding and complications that run up. So it's probably going to take quite a while for those things to get rounded out. So yeah, what I've seen, I haven't seen a whole lot of Crowfall combat. I've watched a few streams and stuff like that. Seen some people play the Confessor. I think that's the only class that I've actually seen streamed, and obviously they engage other players of the other classes. But what can you kind of talk in some detail about maybe what you guys are envisioning for how people's roles are going to play a part in the campaign, or how they're coordinating with allies and things like that?
You mean the archetypical roles of the characters?
Yes, the archetypes. Sorry, not the classes. I'm so used to saying
Got-
classes, but yeah, archetypes. I'm glad you
Yeah,
brought up
it's
that.
funny too because we as a studio tend to use the same name for a lot of things. I think Blade Master is a discipline, and it was an archetype, and it's like, oh my god, we've used the same word 4 times. Let's just put it in one, so not to confuse people. And funny with the archetypes, we have the archetypes, and then we have the promotion classes, which is what an archetype promotes into after a period of time. But as far as how the archetypes interact with combat, one of our early realizations when we were building the Hunger Dome, the very first one was going to be a one-on-one endeavor, which was we would drop 40 people in the map and you just had to survive. We noticed super early on that 1v1 wasn't working well. We just weren't building these classes as we'd spec them out on our big giant board. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where I put all the note cards up and we put notes on everyone and how all of the archetypes fit with each other. We'd been building to that, which is a team-based combat game, but we'd been thinking about that, but we'd been implementing and playing a 1v1. So it's like, screw that. Let's just implement teams into Hunger Dome 1.0. And this was probably after the first week of us doing our internal play tests, and just think about the game as a team-based game just right now. Let's just get 1v1 out of all of our heads and build to the teams. So the Legionnaire is very complementary to the rest of the team right now. He's our first support style character. He's our battlefield commander is what we're calling him. And he moves quicker than everybody else because he's got those extra 2 feet there as his big old horse body. He debuffs, he buffs, and he has a light amount of healing. And the combination of all those things is a team with a really good Legionnaire can just dominate in the Hunger Dome, whereas teams who have a poor Legionnaire don't do so well. So, I mean, that's just your traditional healing, but we built it in thinking about every team is going to have one of these guys or an equivalent role in the team to make the combat fun. So, like the Confessor teams, they've turned into our short to mid range ranged character. The Knight is always up in your grill, and so is the Champion as melee characters. So I'm pretty happy with the team dynamics. We've had a lot of people do some testing playing teams of four Legionnaires or 5 Legionnaires, and while they can heal for a long time, they can't kill anything. And 4 or 5 Confessor teams, and they just don't do very well either, which really speaks to we're kind of nailing the team dynamics right off the bat, which I'm super happy with.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how all of those pieces interact. I've always it's always been a kind of a point of contention for me, I guess, where you have an MMORPG and you have your PvP element that most MMOs bolt onto their system, whether they have it interact as a main part or not is irrelevant. But you've got these different classes and roles, and players are trying to carve out their own niche, and then you get caught in you get caught in this repetitive cycle of just trying to balance everything so that every character feels good against every other character. And I actually like that you guys are just team focused and thinking about how are all these things going to be used in a team. It's not necessarily important how they fight one on one, and I think that's really really good, a really good approach to take to kind of differentiate, for one, from other games out there that are using similar things, but also too for just creating a game experience that you want to provide.
Yeah, I think it leads to other things as we've seen, right? Normally, the theme park MMOs tend to build around their PVE experience, and then, as you mentioned, they bolt on the PvP at the end, and then it's like, well, in PvP, I need to be able to do this, this, and this, and they always think of it on that small scale. So you end up adding powers to make all of the classes essentially able to do the things that the other classes were doing. So everybody becomes this big homogenized mess because they need to have all of these PvP powers as well. And I think it kind of blurs the class lines where everybody thinks that they get an escape or they get a way to hunker down or a way to stay the exact same speed as everybody else. I mean, it just, if you have a mentality of this guy is a building block in a team and this is what he brings to the team, you can make your classes pure and they have that focus. Now that does mean that if another team knows how to eliminate that element, right, you can shoot off the landing gear on that other plane. It's not going to be able to land. Same thing in team-based combat, right? You're able to take out the DPS right off the bat. Then that team is going to be crippled. So I really like where it leads to the pure class design, but it definitely makes it more challenging in PvP because you have to be able to protect those guys, which segues into just a little physics offset. I've seen a behavior in our early combat, which is kind of cool, which is body blocking. I'll notice that our legionnaires, who are big giant horse guys, they can dash really quickly and knock somebody out of the melee kind of ball. So if a confessor and a champion are beating on somebody, they can actually use their body to shield and or charge they'll hit their own player and push him away as they're pushing forward. Normally what would happen is they would hit and stop because you don't use real physics in most of the MMOs. So it's kind of cool to see things like body blocking come up as this emergent behavior, and we just put it in, didn't even think about it, right? Like, he has a mass, he has a charge, put the chocolate and peanut butter together, and boom, he's now using his body as a shield to prevent damage on his teammates, which is really cool.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing. I've I kind of, when you were talking a lot, I was thinking about MOBAs, being an influence maybe that you guys might be looking at as you're doing your class design and stuff. But just imagining, a MOBA to have something like that already sounds like it would improve those. So it's pretty cool to see that you guys are doing that with your game, and I'm really interested to see how the end product and obviously how it plays out and develops. But that does sound really unique.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I was going to
build
say
it as a power in something like a MOBA, but it would be an explicit thing, right? Like, I drop a physical wall down, and we've seen that in a lot of the MOBAs, but not so much, hey, I intersperse myself as a living shield to absorb the hit that would have killed you.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy. I thought you had something to say there.
No, sorry. I mean, I was going to go back to one of your previous points about making sure that classes do feel unique, and it's not everyone trying to do the same thing in just slightly different ways. And I was going to say, coming from more MOBA and specifically League of Legends background myself, it's something that they've been really working towards, is making sure that when you're putting together your team composition, as you said, you don't just have 5 pure DPS classes or 5 pure support classes because you expect them to be able to win no matter what. There is a very there's value certainly in needing to have different play styles, different classes, and that also comes to the player base as well, because not every player that comes in wants to play the exact same way. You're going to have the people that are going to enjoy playing, say, as the Legionnaires, and people that enjoy playing as the Confessor, and that just comes down to personality type as well. So making sure that their choice of archetype and then to class really does feel impactful and makes them feel good about creating the character they created, and going in that route is definitely important.
Yeah, I agree. So looking as a systems guy, just looking at character design across the different genres, I really personally enjoy looking at the design for the MOBA style characters because they are very focused. I mean, they even do. They don't have the same problems that an MMO has, which is player expectations in an MMO is I can play a male or female version of this class, and this class does a whole bunch of things. In a MOBA, this character does a very specific thing and is always a dude, right? Or is always a female. And then they just build lots of those, right? So you'll have 40 different characters at the end of the day because you don't really have to worry about the same constraints that an MMO has. Like, how is armor going to look on this version of this the human playing as a rogue? What does this look like on him if he's a male? What does it look like on him as a female? They don't have to build all these extra art assets, which is kind of funny that a lot of this is constrained by how much art you can build. Art is one of the I've seen a lot of articles recently. Just the cost of building things in MMOs comes down to it's art. You need a crap ton of art, and you don't have a lot of people to make it, so you have to kind of cut corners where you can, and or a lot of studios you have to do tons of outsourcing because otherwise you would just never get the art to build anything in time. Right. I saw a really interesting article on the Warcraft. Their largest pull is their environments. Their dungeon environments take them a very long time to do, so that's what constrains them, and it's similar with everybody.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I mean, playing in a visual new world, everything needs an artist behind it. So, yeah, main cost there. I'm really, I don't know, I guess really curious to see how you guys, how the kind of traditional MMORPG player, finds their way into your game and finds out whether they like it or not. It seems like it's going to be very different. Having the gender assigned to specific choice of what they choose with their class or archetype or what have you, and then also too having the Eternal Kingdoms as that major persistent world element. Just seeing how that ties in, it's going to be very different. So I'm excited though. One thing I think Jeremy and I have talked about a lot in the recent shows over the last few weeks is just how the MMO landscape is just changing in general. There's a lot of new indie games coming out, small studios trying to get crowdfunded to make their, what they believe is like an awesome new game with some cool new innovations, and not just doing the traditional, building off of the what I call just the EQ, the EverQuest model. There's more people experimenting with things Ultima Online was doing and coming up with new things. So I'm excited to see how these games that I think a lot of people would classify as niche, serving niche markets, actually diversify the landscape, and you're not just having a major juggernaut competing for all the players. So it's cool to see that you guys are pursuing a specific gameplay style, and I'm really hoping to see you guys carve out a nice market spot for the competitive players, and pulling in people that maybe thought or had never tried that game, or maybe they play an MMO because they like the combat in it, and this will be a better version of what MMO PvP, I should say specifically, will be like.
Yeah, I think so. You hit on a couple points there. Most of our male and female archetypes, they all share both sexes. Our monsters, which were the centaur, the minotaur, the fey assassin, they were all sex limited in the beginning, and we did various stretch goals to unlock them. So most of ours do have both of the sexes available to them, which is, as I pointed out earlier, become a substantial art cost. But going into the second thing that you were bringing up, which is really great, is that the industry has finally acknowledged that you just can't keep making WoW clones nonstop, right? It's just you can't do it. People tried to do it in different ways. They didn't hit the mark. I mean, because MMO for a lot of people has become synonymous with World of Warcraft, right? So there's a couple groups of the audience, which is the older players who existed before then, who do remember the EverQuest, the Galaxies, the Ultima Onlines, those very sandboxy experiences. And then there's those who grew up with just WoW, and WoW is their only thing, so that's what they define an MMO by. And what's great is now that indie studios have a lot of the tools, so they don't need these big massive teams to make an MMO, we can kind of go back to some of the roots of the MMO industry and start exploring things that just kind of died off because everybody all of a sudden switched to try and chase the WoW dollars, right? Everybody was like, well, we can't make sandboxes anymore because everybody obviously wants to play these theme parks. So you saw an era of nothing but theme park MMOs. And then now, with the younger generation coming up playing Minecraft, they're very used to the harder, build your own world, more sandboxy style of experiences. So it's cool to see kind of the design spectrum kind of come full circle, and hopefully a bunch of these sandbox style MMOs will hit it off, including us.
Yeah, I'm definitely hoping you guys do well following your development. Definitely appreciate the way you guys manage manage your expectations of your player base. I think that's something maybe I like just personally had gotten like a bad taste in my mouth from other projects. Just not doing a good job of managing expectations when letting it. I guess it's like the best way to explain it is, early access is like suddenly a thing now. Like over the last few years, with crowdfunding, and then you have, it seems like every other game is on like Steam Greenlight early access now. So it's just something that's actually really challenging to do for one, and potentially really dangerous for your game if you don't manage player expectations well. So I'm really like glad to see the way you guys are doing things. So it makes following the project a lot of fun. Even as somebody who's not necessarily as much of a competitive player, I do have my competitive spurts and I enjoy my PvP. But yeah, I'm also a big role player, so I enjoy like the story and narrative of games as well too. So Crowfall is like off to the side. It's really intriguing to me, so I'm following it just because I love what you guys are doing. But yeah, I'm hoping you guys do well, and all the other projects too that are pursuing some innovative MMORPG styles are going to do well too.
Yeah, it's kind of amusing because whenever a new one pops up, and Todd will say something to me about it, and I'll be like, well, what's their pedigree? Meaning, what have the designers who have worked on it built before? And you're like, you can instantly gauge, oh, these guys haven't built an MMO before. They're forgetting about these 850,000 things that are actually the pieces that go into an MMO. It just, they're so big, and it's really challenging to actually pull it through. So one of the nice things about early access is you can kind of get a litmus test on if your idea is even does the market want this, right? I think Arc has shown a cool thing with theirs, which they started out very small, and then now they're huge. And hey, it turns out that people want to play a sandbox style environment with some building and dinosaurs, because dinosaurs, right? I mean, and it's kind of been interesting to watch that thing grow over the last year. And then while that one has succeeded, tons have just kind of withered on the vine, right? I mean, it's a great litmus test for, do you have a good idea? Is getting people in early and seeing if they have fun or not. Typically in the game space, and it's kind of funny, you hear about this process, which is we have 3 years of building to do. And let's just build all the things that fit in this very specific order. And then at the end, we're going to combine it all together and find the fun. And you wait multiple years before you even see if your game is fun, right? Rather, with the early access, is you put it in the hands of the players right off the bat, and they tell you, hey, this part's fun, this is not fun, or what the hell are you guys doing, right? So you can use those as giant course correction moments to kind of course correct and find the fun early rather than waiting till the end, and then you have no choice because you have a launch date.
Yeah, I'm really I'm always really intrigued by the way different studios handle their early access and what ends up becoming of it. But I like what you guys are doing, and I like that being able to get the players in there so early is helping you guys getting things rolling and testing things out and helping you refine what you want to do with each individual archetype and what you want to do with your world and destructibility. So I can't wait to see more of those bigger game elements that you guys want to have in there with the destructibility and like large projectiles, like you were saying, and other things start making their way in over in the near future. Which, speaking of the near future, we're getting close to the end here with about 5 minutes or so. So I wanted to give a little bit of time to let you talk about, what's the latest with Crowfall, what's new, and what players can be expecting for maybe for somebody who has no idea and isn't following Crowfall, and then maybe also for players who are listening to your every word and tracking you everywhere.
And they'll listen to the playback and see if I dropped any hints for clues for the reveal for the month.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we are in our second phase of the Hunger Dome 1.1. We are about to say adieu to this version and close down the Hunger Dome at the end of next week, so we can put our heads back down and start building bigger, larger things and not support the live environment, which we announced today is something we're calling Siege Perilous, which is our destruction module. So we're actually going to have a bunch of destruction in there and a couple teams, and we're going to see if we can make the structure sieging as fun as we have made the small team combat. So we're going to see what happens when we put people on two opposing teams, and is that a lot of fun with all of these things blowing up around you and our kind of limited availability of classes. We'll be introducing the Ranger at that time as well. So we'll have another combatant on the field for people to play with. So that's what's in our immediate future. And I'm really looking forward to getting in there and blowing up a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I'm pretty excited to watch how things play out. It's very cool to watch. Crowfall is one of the games that I tune into to watch streamers just to see what the latest thing is. I don't really do that with a lot of other games that I follow. I check in on the news, but I don't actually care to look at what the gameplay is sometimes. You're just following what's new and upcoming. So it's really cool to see how things are developing. So I'm excited to see what you guys do with that next phase and bringing destructibility into the mix.
Yeah, it's also an exciting time for us because as this phase has been winding down, the engineers we've had working on the progression systems are starting to come online. So players may have noticed things like the passive skill training system all of a sudden just started working halfway through this iteration of the Hunger Dome. And for me, it's super exciting because it's all of those advancement systems for the players that make up an MMO, right? Because you could endlessly play an arena deathmatch over and over again, but players really like to advance their characters, shockingly enough, huh? So it's cool to see those things come online, and yeah, it's super exciting times for us.
Very cool. Well, I think that is going to wrap us up here pretty much. I do want to thank you, Thomas, for coming on and talking with us about Crowfall and kind of letting people know more about the game that for our audience that may or may not be familiar with it. And then, of course, for anybody that follows Crowfall a lot and is coming, listening into this, thank you for coming and listening to this whole thing. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation we've had here and discussion with the developer from Crowfall. And we, if you enjoy our content, again, 10 Ton Hammer, we do this show every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, so you guys can catch it live, and we also port it to YouTube. So, and chances are you may be watching it there right now, so go ahead and subscribe, and you'll see when the new episodes pop up, as well as our other content from 10 Ton Hammer. But the majority of the stuff we do is written content, so check out our main site. We cover a lot of games. Crowfall is one of them, and one I enjoy covering. So definitely check us out and follow us, and I hope you guys enjoy your weekend, the rest of it, for you guys that have tuned in live. And we're going to catch you next time. Jeremy, if I usually always miss something in the end here.
You've been doing a lot better these past weeks. So
all right.
I'm very proud. No, you pretty much got it. I said just tune in when you can. If not, I said it will be on the YouTube channel. We also do post it on the main 10tonhammer.com site as well. So if nothing else, you can always follow everything we're doing there.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much again, Thomas, and thank
welcome.
you guys in the audience. Yeah, we will catch you next time. Ta-ta.
Bye.
You guys, take care.